Dubro Suspicion Files.
All right, let's open up the files. Today's case is a strange one for sure. Case File 042, the simulation hypothesis. Seriously, think about it for a second. How do you know? I mean, really know. This isn't a new question. Ages ago, a sage named Zhuangzi had this dream that he was a butterfly. And when he woke up, he was totally spun out. He couldn't figure out if he was a man who had just dreamed he was a butterfly, or if he was a butterfly right now dreaming he was a man. It's this classic mind bender, right? But today, that old philosophical riddle has gotten a serious high-tech upgrade.
So here's the core idea. The simulation hypothesis isn't just saying reality is, some kind of dream. It's much more specific. The proposition is that our entire universe, everything from physics to your own consciousness, is just a ridiculously complex computer program. So for this explainer, let's play prosecutor. We're going to lay out the evidence, both for and against this wild claim. The court is now in session.
Okay, first up, Exhibit A. We're starting our investigation with what I can only describe as a logical trap. It's an argument designed to corner you into thinking this whole simulation thing might just be true, and it all comes from a super influential paper by a philosopher named Nick Bostrom back in 2003.
Now, what Bostrom did was clever. He doesn't come right out and say, hey, we're in a simulation. Instead, he lays out this thing called a trilemma. It's like a dilemma, but with 3 options. And his point is that based on pure logic, one of these 3 kind of wild propositions has to be true.
So let's break this down. Option 1, humanity just wipes itself out before we get super, super advanced, what he calls a post-human stage. Bummer. Option 2, we get post-human, but for whatever reason, we're just not interested in running simulations of our ancestors. Maybe it's boring, maybe it's unethical, who knows? Okay, but what if both of those are wrong? What if we do get super advanced and we do decide to run simulations? Well, we wouldn't run just one, right? We'd run billions of them. So many that the number of simulated people would totally dwarf the number of real, original people. So if that's the case, what are the odds that you're one of the original, organic few, versus one of the billions upon billions of simulated consciousnesses? Statistically speaking, yeah, you're probably in a simulation. That's the trap.
And I gotta admit, it feels pretty airtight at first, right? But poke it a little, and you find some serious holes. For starters, you've got this infinite regress problem. Okay, so we're a simulation. Cool. Who simulated our simulators? And who simulated their simulators? You see the problem? It doesn't actually answer anything. It just pushes the question up another level. Then there's Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. And a single base reality is way, way simpler than a base reality plus some hyper-advanced civilization plus their desire and ability to simulate us. It's just adding all these unproven layers. It's total speculation, pretending to be cold, hard logic.
Okay, let's put the philosophy aside for a minute and move on to Exhibit B. This is where things get a lot more personal. We're talking about those weird little moments in your own life that just don't feel right. Proponents have a name for them, of course. Glitches in the matrix. The supposed proof that the code of reality is starting to fray at the edges.
You've probably heard of this one, the Mandela Effect. The classic example, the one everyone talks about, is the Berenstain Bears. Come on, you remember it with an E, right? Berenstain? A whole lot of people do, but it was never spelled that way. For simulation believers, this is evidence of a recon, a patch in the software of reality. But, well, science has a much less sci-fi explanation. It's called false memory. Our brains aren't video recorders. When we remember something, we're actually rebuilding it. And sometimes our brain just fills in the gaps with stuff that seems plausible. That's called confabulation. Then you go online, see 1,000 other people making the same mistake, and suddenly it feels like a shared truth. It's just social reinforcement of a common error.
And then there's déjà vu. Oh man, that feeling. That super weird, spooky sense that you have absolutely lived this exact moment before. The simulation explanation? A developer spotted a bug in your code and just hit rewind on your consciousness for a couple of seconds. But neurologists have a pretty compelling counterargument. It's called dual processing delay. Basically, your brain gets the same sensory input through 2 slightly different pathways, and one is just a few milliseconds behind the other. Usually it syncs up perfectly, but every now and then there's a tiny lag, and your brain interprets that second signal not as now, but as a memory. You're literally remembering the present moment. Wild, huh?
All right, on to Exhibit C. And this is supposedly the heavy hitter, the core scientific case. The argument here is that if you zoom in on the fundamental laws of physics, you can actually see
the fingerprints of whoever or whatever wrote the code. Just look at this number, 2%. Let's talk about the strong nuclear force. That's the stuff holding atoms together. If you tweaked that force, making it just 2% stronger, just 2%, then poof, no stars, no planets, no life, nothing. It just wouldn't exist. Now, does that feel random to you? Or does it feel a little too perfect? A little designed? So this all feeds into three big scientific arguments. First, you have that fine-tuning we just talked about. The constants of the universe seem perfectly set for life, which kind of implies a designer, right? The counterargument is something called the anthropic principle, and we'll circle back to that in just a sec. Second, the idea of pixelation. Proponents look at the Planck length, the smallest possible unit in physics, and say, aha, that's the resolution of the simulation. Reality is made of pixels. But physicists are quick to point out that's not what the Planck length is. It's a limit in our math, not a physical pixel of space. And third, this is a cool one. A physicist named James Gates actually found something that looked a lot like computer error-correcting code embedded in the deep equations of reality. But, and this is a big but, Gates himself says, no, it's not literal code. It's just a case of different fields of study discovering the same underlying mathematical structures. Okay, so back to that anthropic principle. The best way to understand it comes from the brilliant Douglas Adams. He imagined a puddle of water that suddenly gains consciousness, and it looks around and thinks, wow, look at this hole I'm in. It fits me perfectly. It must have been designed just for me. The puddle is missing the point, isn't it? It exists because the hole was shaped that way, and that's the argument about our universe. We are that puddle. Of course, the universe looks perfectly tailored for us. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here to wonder about it in the first place. Okay, let's recap the case so far. The logic seems circular. The so-called glitches can be explained by neurology. The code in the physics seems to be a misinterpretation. So if the evidence is, let's be honest, pretty weak, why is this idea so powerful? Why does it grab us? That brings us to our final exhibit, not the universe, but the human mind itself. So yeah, what is it about this idea? Why does it feel so right to so many people? The answer, it turns out, might have nothing to do with physics or computer science. It might be all about the software running inside our own heads. You see, our brains are basically belief engines. They're wired to find meaning. We have this thing called patternicity, a tendency to see patterns in random noise, like seeing faces in the clouds. Then agenticity takes over. We assume someone or something created that pattern on purpose. So we see the fine-tuned universe and our brain immediately goes, aha, a fine-tuner. There's also proportionality bias. We think a huge effect, like the entire universe, must have a huge cause. Random chance just doesn't feel big enough. And maybe most importantly, it gives us a weird kind of comfort, an illusion of control. A reality that was designed feels a lot less scary and chaotic than one that's just random. And when you look at it through that lens, you realize something. The simulation hypothesis isn't really a scientific theory at all. It's a story that fits our modern technological world perfectly. It's basically a creation myth for the 21st century. Think about it. Instead of God, we have the developer. Instead of fate, we have the code. Instead of a creation story, we have the simulation. It's the same story structure, just with a sci-fi skin. So we've reviewed the entire case file. We've heard the arguments, we've cross-examined the evidence. It's time to head into closing arguments and summarize what we found. We started with Bostrom's logical trap, but it turned out to be circular logic. We looked at the glitches in the matrix, but they were really just quirks of our own neurology. We searched for code hidden in the laws of physics, but all we found was mathematics. So it seems like the case is pretty much closed, except there's that one file that just won't shut, that one piece of evidence that still feels weird. The stubborn, eerie fact of fine-tuning. The universe really, truly seems to be perfectly set up for us. And yeah, the anthropic principle, that whole puddle analogy, it's a perfectly logical explanation for it. It makes sense. But let me just ask you, is it a satisfying explanation? Or does some part of you still feel like it's dodging the real question, like something is missing? We've laid out all the evidence, the case for the prosecution and the case for the defense. Scientifically, there's no proof we're in a simulation. But belief isn't always about proof, is it? It's about what feels right. And so, with all the exhibits on the table, we're closing the file. The final judgment, well, that's up to you.